Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Sound check, system check. Testing. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Thank you for attending today's webinar on international procurement strategies, challenges, and opportunities. I'm your host, David Millington, the Director of Education for Next Level Purchasing Association. So today's topic is a topic that it's not going to go away as our supply chains become more internationalized and global. So this prepare for, as your careers, you advance in your careers, to be engaged in overseas and in buying overseas procurement and the globalization of the supply chain and all of these activities. So the scope of today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on unlocking key strategies and leveraging a strategic framework. So we would look at some essential strategies, and we'll, towards the end of the webinar, we'll put it all together in a strategic framework and context. And then we'll be leveraging, I'll go heavily into the concept of change management. And we'll be looking at we'll be examining some tools to create world-class and effective procurement and supply chain synergies. So it is very important that we understand why our organizations exist. And it may seem a bit of a theory, but in reality, if we ask the typical procurement or supply chain professionals, why does our business exist? What's the purpose of the existence of our business? What's the purpose of the existence of our procurement or supply chain departments? You'll be surprised. You'll get a whole plethora of answers to that question in the same organization, and that very variation is a point of could create a potential problem. So in essence, a business exists to create value for our customers. It's as simple as that. And value has three components according to many experts. And that is, there's a conversion of raw material inputs from one stage to the next, and all of the activities that are engaged in that transformation are done right the first time. And then thirdly, our customers, our end users, are willing to pay for the output or the products, the resulting products and services from those activities. So there's a conversion or a transformation from one stage to the next. All activities are done right the first time, and the end user is willing to pay for the resulting output or products and services. So as far as the matter or the affair of being done right the first time, it is very important that procurement professionals look at our organizations internally and ask that question: do we really do our conversion activities right the first time? Is there any rework in what we do in our day-to-day activities? And if we look at our own departments, how many times do we rework some of our processes or activities. And so it's very important that we understand that. So value has three components, and this is why we exist. So another question would be, well, why procure internationally? What's the need for an organization to procure internationally? Wouldn't it be easier to procure within the borders of our own countries? Well, we would find that the most common reason is cost. And the purpose of a procurement function, one, is to manage spend. Secondly, to support operations. And thirdly, to protect our organizations from risk. So that is the core mandate. And that is usually how I start my webinars, focusing on why is the procurement function in existence. So we understand that the business is here to create value. So then what is the purpose of the procurement function? Why do we exist as procurement professionals? Why are we here? What is our mandate? What is our mission? And again, that is to support operations, to manage spend, and to protect our organizations from risk and all of the risk factors that exist in a supply chain. So with that said, in terms of managing spend and obtaining high quality raw material inputs at the right cost structure. So we have to be able to put a lid and manage spend. So in terms of a justification or a business case for procuring internationally, if those raw material inputs are available across seas or internationally at a lower cost, then we would have no justification for buying those material inputs locally. So this is one of the major considerations and factors of international procurement, the cost of those raw material inputs. And then there are other factors that we have to consider, and there are other reasons that that we would procure international. We'll go through that on the next slide. But a lot of the reasoning or the rationale behind us being able to get our materials, our mission critical raw material inputs at a lower cost could be lower wages, greater labor efficiency, or lower materials cost, or a combination of the above. And this is could be a definite compelling reason to source internationally. Other reasons to procure internationally could be higher quality, less complexity or movement in the supply chain itself, better governmental and public relations, or better easier and less restrictive governmental laws and obstacles. Also, a greater assurance of, again, supply chain shortages, and to be able to leverage the technologies of suppliers that may be overseas. So again, we would have to understand the environmental factors that underpin our decisions and that underpin our situation, our business landscape. So, and this goes into the matter of understanding the global context of supply chains and procurement functions. So it is very important for us to understand that our procurement function and our supply chains do not function or exist in a silo or in a bubble. So we have to understand the environmental context, the business landscape, or the landscape in which our businesses operate. And we have to look at the socio-demographic dimensions, the ecological dimensions or factors in our environment, the economic factors in our environment, and the technological trends and factors in our environment. And of course, as we see today, the rise of tariffs and trade wars. So we have to understand the political context and backdrop of our organization's situation and what's happening in the particular industries that we're in, and what our competitors up to. So we have to understand the competitive environment. So, and this is what we call the concept of environmental scanning. So it is very important that us as procurement professionals are able to conduct effective environmental scanning. And from this science or this activity of environmental scanning, understanding the business landscape, understanding the pressures in which our businesses must function, and understanding the pressures and the complexities that our supply chains exist in is very important. And we have to ask three fundamental questions. What is trending in each one of these spaces? Ecological, economic, technological, socio-demographic, political, competitive. What is trending? What are the trends? We have to be abreast. On a day-to-day basis, we have to be abreast of what's trending. And then we have to understand what is the impact of those trends or those shifts. Are they seismic? And what is the impact of those trends on our organizations? And then we have to ask ourselves as procurement professionals, and we have to be able to advise as procurement professionals, what are the strategies that are in place to leverage opportunities or to capitalize on opportunities that exist as per what's trending in each one of these spaces or dimensions, or what are our risk mitigation strategies if the trends or the impacts on our organizations are negative. Again, taking into context that part of the procurement function mandate is to protect our organizations from risk and to assure that there is no disruption in our supply chains. So with that said, the SPSM program, the SPSM 1, levels 2, levels 3, and we're about to complete levels 4. They all prepare procurement professionals to be able to understand and to navigate and to be able to function effectively as far as these environmental scanning and global context dynamics are concerned. And here we go into, again, the purpose or the mission of the procurement function. And I'll reiterate: to manage spend and support operations and to protect our organizations from risk and ensuring that the effective risk mitigation strategies. So it is very important that we view our supply chain and we view the science of international procurement from a systems thinking perspective. And that we understand that our supply chains or international procurement is a function of suppliers who must be reliable, who must be capable and responsive, and they must be aligned to our organization's strategic objectives and goals. And these suppliers are to provide mission critical raw material inputs at the right price points, at the right quality levels, all of the time, consistently. So we must examine these inputs, and we must examine and we must ensure that we have what we call a robust supplier selection matrix or mechanism to ensure that we select the right suppliers, or suppliers who have these qualities to provide us these raw material inputs at the right price points, at the right quality level, with a high degree of consistency. And these raw material inputs move into our organization, and they hit or they reach our conversion processes. And we must ensure that these raw material inputs are on time in the right quantities. And we must reflect and understand our procurement processes themselves, that they're robust, they're capable, we have the right technology, we have the right skill sets to ensure that our suppliers are doing what they're supposed to do, that our raw materials are coming in on time at the right price points. Because if we don't, then we will be causing a disruption to our operations, which is one of the second point on the mandate of the procurement function in terms of supporting operations. And that we ensure and we enable our organizations to meet our customer requirements. So the better we are as procurement professionals, the better we are at understanding our customer requirements, better we will be at executing our job functions. The better we will be at impacting in a positive way the total cost of ownership, which is one of the key, fundamental, very, very, very basic metrics of the procurement function, the total cost of ownership. And we will elaborate more on that later on. So again, suppliers, process, output, customers. So we have to understand this science. It's called the SIPOC methodology, and it's a method of looking at our supply chains and our procurement function and our businesses, our internal and external processes in a very holistic and systems thinking way. So strategy number one, and I'm going to go into about 5 strategies or so for leveraging international procurement. And strategy number one would be to leverage end-to-end synergy and efficiencies. So this would require business process improvement and optimization. So in this, if we are to leverage this strategy, we have to be able to look at our supply chains and identify opportunities or identify problems or bottlenecks that exist in our supply chains. And we have to be able to clearly define them and to, I would say, to write a very, very, very clear problem statement. Because many times problems exist in our supply chains and we're not able to clearly define them or to understand them. And a lot of times we might understand problems a certain way if you're looking at them from as procurement or supply chain practitioners, and then other people in the organization or other departments may look at the same problem in an entirely different way. So the idea here is to be able to collaborate and to be able to deploy some methodology of problem definition, of problem identification and problem definition. So the better we are at removing problems in our supply chain, the smoother our international procurement and even domestic procurement would be realized. So one of the key attributes of problem definition would be to write a problem statement. And a good problem statement articulates how long a particular problem has been existing in our supply chain. So how long? What is the magnitude or the fiscal impact of that problem? So problem A has been present or been going on for X amount of time, 12 months or 13 months, and it has caused $1.2 million of negative impact on the business. And a good problem statement would identify and pinpoint which process is driving that problem. So again, how long a problem has been occurring, which process, is driving that problem, and what is the impact of on the organization and the customer of that particular problem. So this should be no more than a 4 to 6 sentence statement. Very important. And then the next step would be to measure the degree of non-conformance to the business and customer requirements. So as procurement professionals, again, as I mentioned before, we cannot operate in silos. So we have to understand the strategic objectives of our organization, and we have to understand what non-conformance to those objectives mean. And we must understand our customer requirements. We must engage our customers and make sure that we are aware of any shifts. The modern customer, the mindset of the modern customer is shifting and changing at a rapid rate. So the better we are at understanding those requirements, and the better we are at detecting any shifts in those requirements, the better we will be at responding. So again, the next step in leveraging strategy number 1 will be to measure the degree of non-conformance and to determine the gap, the degree of the gap. And to then, the next phase will be to understand the root causes of non-conformance. Because many times we have problems and we jump straight to solutions or potential solutions without understanding the root cause for that non-conformance. And then finally, we would design cost-effective solutions to close those performance gaps. So this is one strategy that we could leverage in our international procurement activities. And we have to understand that the dynamics of international procurement, they're very, very broad and very, very deep. So there are problems. There are problems that are going to drive cost, and they're going to drive customer dissatisfaction. So the better we are at identifying those, not burying our heads in the sand, and again, defining them, defining the problems, measuring the degree of non-conformance, understanding the root causes of non-conformance, and then designing cost-effective solutions to close those gaps. And the key here is to collaborate with all key stakeholders. So it's very important, if you're going to leverage this strategy, that we understand the interest of each one of our key stakeholders in our environment. Strategy number 2 will be to preserve and care about the ecological landscape that provides our raw material inputs. And we have seen over the decades many organizations who set up supply chains, international supply chains, and many times a lot of those environments are decimated. The landscape, there's deforestation, all types of landfill issues, spill issues, and just devastation of the landscapes that we procure our raw material inputs from. So the better we are at caring and sincerely caring about where we get our raw material inputs and caring about the actual physical environment and the people in those environments, the better we would be at having a sustainable supply chain. So this is a very, 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 very effective strategy, and it should be done with the high degree of sincerity and not as some public relations or marketing spin on it. So this should be done again with a high degree of sincerity. And we have to understand that the modern customer, one of the key requirements of the modern customer is that their products are designed and delivered in an eco-friendly manner. So it used to be the mindset and the requirements of the modern customer used to be the modern customer wants their products quickly. They want it cheaper and faster. And cheaper, better or higher quality, and faster. So, and now we have to add eco-friendly. So this is the fourth requirement. And this is not going to change. Now, with the internet and social media and the exposure of many of our corporations, the modern corporations, this is an area that we really have to pay attention to and understand this critical requirement. So this is a basic and fundamental requirement. And as procurement professionals, it is part of our job is to stay abreast of the developments relative to climate change, global warming, and eco-friendly consciousness. So this way we are better able to position our activities and to manage our procurement function. And a third strategy would be to improve the lives of the people in the communities we purchase from. So many progressive organizations provide educational programs, they provide healthcare and other social benefit programs to the communities that we procure from internationally. And the key with this is to be sincere. So the better we are at being sincere with this strategy, the better the outcome would be. And again, we should not leverage a strategy of this sort as a public relations or a marketing stunt. And strategy number 4, and we're getting a little pressed for time. Strategy number 4 would be to leverage the common interest of all key stakeholders in our supply chain and develop what I call an integrated strategic master plan. So we must, part of the environmental scan and part of the understanding the business landscape, part of the SIPOC methodology that we mentioned earlier, suppliers, input, process, output, customers, is to look at our organizations internally and externally and understand the interest of each segment of our supply chain. So internally, it would be the interest of the marketing function, the interest of the finance function or the folks in finance, the interest of the manufacturing team or the production team, the logistics function, and all of the enabling and supporting functions, that we understand their positions and their interests. And the key is to deploy intense collaboration. So if we are to succeed in domestic and international procurement, collaboration is key. The better we are at collaborating or supply chains or organizations that are best able to collaborate upstream and downstream are the best at executing their procurement and supply chain functions and creating customer value. So this would involve information sharing and leveraging the innovation capacities of upstream processes. Also, we could go upstream to our suppliers and leverage their capabilities that maybe there's a gap internally in our business environment or our function. And we realize that our suppliers have enhanced core competencies and capabilities. We could negotiate and leverage those capabilities. And we could also share our innovation capabilities with our suppliers and our customers as well. So information sharing and in helping each other, and when I mean each other, our upstream and our downstream and internally as well, doing that benchmarking and helping each other to improve. And then the key would be to, again, we have to, in our supplier selection process, we have to put critical criteria in there as we scorecard our suppliers to make sure that they're able to, number one, to meet our customer requirements, and they're aligned and capable to meet our customer requirements, and they're aligned. So there has to be criteria in the supplier selection process to ensure that our suppliers are aligned to our strategic objectives and mission. So the key would be to look at our suppliers, look at our function as procurement professionals internally, and look at our customers and facilitate the drafting up of this master document where all of the strategies or strategic plans and goals and objectives upstream and downstream are aligned. And then they're aligned to our customer requirements. And the goal here would to be negotiate and ensure that this plan enables synergy. So, and I say the traditional mindset or methods or processes of beating up suppliers solely on price, this is losing ground. This is no longer the way that a modern procurement function could exist and be effective. So that methodology is losing ground. Again, collaboration, aligning our suppliers and our customers, and aligning all functions internally in our organization, all of the departments, and making sure that there's total alignment upstream and downstream is key. So this is a very, very, very powerful strategy to leverage and to help in its creation. So the idea is to strengthen the entire supply chain, focusing on collective needs and common interests. This way we create a supply chain that is one of a win-win in nature and a win-win proposition across the spectrum. And then strategy number 5 would be to leverage technology or sophisticated modern technology. And we see the rise of artificial intelligence. We see the rise of and the expansion of data analytics. Gone are the days of solely descriptive analytics. Now we have moved into prescriptive and predictive analytics, and now we have machine learning and autonomous analytics, where the technologies and machines that could learn from activities in the environment and learn from the past and respond to future needs in our supply chain. And we see the rise of blockchain that brings a high degree of visibility, fraud protection to our supply chain, and collaboration. It also enhances collaboration. And we are poised to see a strong and tremendous digitization of the procurement function. So we may look at and be proactive and examine these technologies and be prepared to see how they could help us improve our processes and reduce the total cost of ownership. And as we see at the bottom of the screen, the 4th point, to map our processes, engage in value stream mapping, as I mentioned before, SIPOC mapping, understanding the 80-20 dimensions of our supply chain, and on the matter of SIPOC, suppliers, inputs, process, output, customers, we understand the supplier variables and dynamics. We understand our inputs, variables and dynamics, and we understand our process inputs and dynamics and output variables. As they say, if we strive to realize a specific outcome, that outcome is the output, or Y is a function of X. So again, the purpose of our businesses are what? To create value for our customers. To be able to, our supply chain exists, or procurement function exists for what? To support operations, to manage spend, and protect our organizations from risk. So with that said, a thorough understanding of the inputs that go into our processes. Our inputs are the enablers to our processes. So it's very important that we understand all inputs to our procurement process. This is on a micro level. We look at our procurement processes and we understand the inputs. We understand who are the providers or suppliers of those inputs. We understand and map our procurement processes. And we understand and we keep track and we measure and we optimize the outputs of our procurement processes. And we have a total understanding of who are the direct customers of the output of our procurement processes. So this is looking at it on a departmental level. And we look at this on a macro level, the entire supply chain, end to end. Who are the suppliers? What are the mission critical inputs that they provide or feed our supply chain? What are the conversion processes that convert these raw material inputs to useful outputs to our customers? And who are our customers? First and foremost, we have to begin with the end in mind. So with this strategy, begin with the end in mind, where I started initially, understanding our customer requirements. And understand that a customer may have 30 or 40 requirements, but we have to understand what are the most critical requirements. And a lot of times there may be 3, 5, or maybe 7 requirements that are critical, customer requirements that are critical, meaning that if we do not deliver and our supply chains do not deliver, that there would be what you call a profound degree of customer dissatisfaction. So we have to look at to be effective in this matter of international procurement, we have to understand our customer requirements. And we have to understand, with that said, we have to understand that 20% of the variables or factors in an international supply chain would drive 80% of the problems in our supply chain. 20%. And then if you look now at what we call the 450 rule, and here's where we could laser focus our international supply chains, where 4% of the variables or factors in our supply chain drive 50% of the issues. Or another way of looking at this is 20% of the products drive 80% of our sales, and 4% of our product line drive 50% of our sales. So to be able to leverage these rules, these 2 power laws, to really focus on what is critical and what is essential. As we mentioned before, to be able, the strategy, I believe it was strategy number 2, to be able to identify problems or issues in our supply chain, in our international supply chain, to be able to identify those problems. We have to look at and again, to understand the critical variables that drive those issues in the first place. And we have to develop our cost savings targets and make sure that we're quite clear on our cost savings targets. So this is strategy number 5. And now let's put it together. We're a little pressed for time, but we're going to put this together. So I mentioned 5 different strategies. You know, And the key is to really understand the 80-20 rule and the 450 rule, because we could have so many potential strategies. And the key is to really understand which strategies would give us the most impact. And we have to understand our time constraints, we have to understand cost constraints, and we have to understand impact on the customer requirements. So every strategy that an organization engages in must have, and this is a caveat, my friends, must have a direct impact on our customer requirements, our critical customer requirements. And as I mentioned before, there could be 3, 5, or 7. And we have to understand that not all requirements are equal. So we have to be able to laser focus. We have to understand that we cannot spend time and resources and focus on what we call, and what I call the insignificant many. We have to focus on the critical few. And again, understand that an international supply chain is very, very, very complex. So we have to look at in terms of risk mitigation strategies, we have to understand what are the few elements that constitute the majority of the risk. What are the 20% of the variables that constitute 80% of the risk in our international supply chain? What are the 4% of variables that constitute 50% of the risk in our international supply chain? And then we laser focus. And we really understand our customer requirements in a prioritized way. So if there are 5, for example, there are 5 critical customer requirements, we have to understand that even with the 5, we have to prioritize them. They may not be all equal. So our strategies must, every strategy that we engage in or that we deploy must have direct correlation and direct impact on those critical requirements, customer requirements. So it all comes down to this. Domestic and international procurement comes down to understanding our customer requirements and understanding our business requirements. But our businesses exist to create value for our customers. So we're ending with how we started here. That's why we exist. So this here is a chart where we could put it all together and align and deploy our strategies with a high degree of visibility. So for example, we see here the situational summary. So from our environmental scan, remember, we understand, we assess the ecological, the socio-demographic, the political, the economic, the industry, and the competitive trends in our environments. And we understand and we're able to articulate and to quantify the trends. We're able to map those trends, and we're able to identify and understand and articulate and to quantify the impact of those trends on our supply chain and international procurement strategy and organization. And we're able to deploy effective strategies. So those strategies, this here is a methodology, and it is from the science of what we call ocean planning, which would better enable us to have a good visual on our strategy and to deploy it. And to make sure that we have what I call balanced measures. So here it is, we have the situational summary. And then we have the corporate mission. And then this organization has 3 key initiatives that they're going to deploy to enable the organization to realize its mission. So the corporate mission here is to improve for this particular company, XYZ Hinge Corporation, right? Is to improve responsiveness of customer door makers by providing hinges with a 2-day turnaround time. That's the core mission. And then we see here there are 3 key initiatives to execute this mission. And each one of those initiatives has an owner or someone who is responsible. And to the right of the screen, we see the metrics that those individuals will be held accountable for. So the CEO, you see the performance metrics on the right, number of orders filled within 2 days, right? Because the strategy is to improve responsiveness of custom door makers by providing hinges with a 2-day turnaround time. So number of orders, one of the key metrics here, number of orders filled within 2 days. So that metric will be tracked. And there's a standard, 97%. It must be 97% or greater. So we see the 4 key strategies that the CEO, or metrics that the CEO is going to be personally responsible for. And then we have the 3 sub strategies, and we see Jason, who's the procurement warehouse operations manager, is responsible for what? Assuring that this organization's customer service satisfaction, ensuring customer satisfaction by delivering high quality hinges within 2 days of receipt of an order. And then Jason has his metrics. And then Brian, the business development manager, has his metrics, which you see to the right of the screen. And then Monique, who is the human capital manager, has her metrics. And then we could break this down even further, where we would take our procurement function or procurement department. We have to develop a mission for our department. If we really want to succeed in procurement at any level, globally or domestically, we have to have a very balanced mission and assure that the procurement function is aligned to the corporate mission. So in this case, Jason is responsible for procurement operations, and Jason has 4 people who are responsible for 4 critical areas of that function. So this methodology, or this ocean planning methodology, and I urge you to do some research on ocean planning, it links each department to the corporate mission. So if this were the accounting department or the finance department, the objectives would look a little bit different. If this were the marketing department, the objectives would be relative to the marketing function. So we see here that Jason is responsible for, and we see Jason's mission, and we see his metrics. And then we look at Sherry, who's the senior buyer. Her mission is to source materials for the manufacture of XYZ, that's the name of the organization, XYZ, for their products, and assure that there are no stockouts of raw material inputs. And then we look at the right of the screen, we look at the performance metrics that Sherry, who's the senior buyer, will be responsible for. And we see here cost of raw materials. And then we see another metric here, raw material reported discrepancies, and we see the standard. She is to make sure that there's 0 discrepancies. And then if you look further down, Barry, who is the packaging supervisor, has his metrics and his mission, right? And his, as the packing supervisor, his mission is to assemble hinges for shipment to customers according to the production plan. And then he has his performance metrics on the right side. So it is very important, one caveat that we get from this, that we have to make sure that we're measuring the right things and the right components and the right dimensions. We have to make sure that we're measuring the right components and our metrics are balanced. So again, to sum it up, we look at the whole international the global situation that our organization, our business is mandated to function in. We look at the landscape, we look at it in a global context, we conduct our environmental scanning, we understand our situation, we understand the political factors and the implications of procuring internationally. We come up with a justification for procuring internationally. So you write that case, that business case, and again, it could be cost reduction, it could be technological factors, it could be many factors that would force us to procure internationally, but we must understand this in a very holistic context. And then from understanding our situation, we understand the trends and we keep abreast of the trends that exist in our environment. And we understand how those trends impact our supply chain. And we develop the necessary strategies. And we're able to align our procurement function with the strategic posture or the mission of our organization, the corporate mission. We're able to align our procurement function and supply chain function to that. And we understand our customer requirements. It all begins there, really, as procurement and supply chain professionals, understanding our customer requirements and ensuring that our suppliers are able to, they enable us and our conversion processes to realize our customer requirements. And we understand, again, putting it together, that collaboration is the key. And to come into a synergy and understanding the interest of all of the key stakeholders and bringing this together into a platform such as you see here on the screen, the ocean planning methodology. So if we are able to do this, we would have a very, we position ourselves to be our supply chains to be able to procure internationally with a high degree of synergy and sophistication. And we make sure that we are aware and we are abreast of the technologies that are out there. And we realize that one of the key and most common objections against the modern procurement function is that it's fragmented, it's robust, it's complicated, it's slow, and we understand and we are abreast of the technologies and we aware that the procurement function and the supply chain function is poised to have a rapid rate of digitization. And we do our due diligence and we prepare ourselves and our skill sets to realize that. So in terms of procurement internationally or domestically, the key is, as leaders, to have that vision, to ensure that we have the right skill sets to procure internationally, to understand, to ensure and to understand our processes and to make sure that we have the right process capabilities and the right levels of accountability to be able to handle the complexities of international procurement. So it starts with a vision, again, making sure we have the right skills, we have the right people, we have the right processes, we embrace technology and be able to continuously improve our processes, right? Remember, that was one of our strategies to continuously improve our processes and to enable our suppliers to improve and to leverage innovation and cooperation upstream and downstream, where we help our suppliers improve, they help us improve, we help our customers improve their processes. So this way we would have the greatest synergy and understanding of supply and demand dynamics. And this would enable us to be better at executing the procurement function. So thank you again for attending today's webinar. And many of the courses in the SPSM platform would go deep into this and give you necessary skill sets that you need to procure internationally. We have our course, executing a global sourcing strategy. We have the basics of smart international procurement, that focuses on many critical variables of international procurement, and then in terms of putting it all together and ensuring that we have high quality inputs coming in and out of our supply chain. We have improving quality in the supply chain. So the SPSM program is definitely a great platform to enable you in your procurement function and in your procurement activities and your professional development. I'm going to leave the floor open for any questions that you may have. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. If you have any questions, if you could send me a message in the chat box, I'll appreciate it. Any questions? I'll leave the floor open to Q&A. Again, thank you for attending today's webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. And if any one of you would like the slides of today's webinar, just shoot me an email. My email is dmillington@nextlevelpurchasing.com, and I'll send you the slides. I'm going to stay online for a couple more minutes just to see if you have any, if anybody has any questions. Just send me a message in the chat box. Again, thank you very much for attending today's webinar. We have webinars on a weekly basis, and I look forward to delivering the next one. And it was indeed a pleasure and an honor to deliver today's webinar and to collaborate with such an illustrious audience of procurement and supply chain professionals.
Informative.
Okay, so you enjoyed it. You
very
enjoyed
much,
it.
very
Okay.
much. Thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome. You shoot me an email and I'll send you all the slides.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank
Have
you.
a great day. And you said from Nigeria, right? That's amazing.
Yes.
That's amazing. Thank you.
All right then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, bye-bye. Hi, Silly, you had a question? Hello? Hello, Lisa? Hi, Christian, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Millington. Yeah, I was ask, can you hear me?
Yes, I could hear you.
Okay. Once again, thank you for this webinar. It's been informative and educative, and always look forward to your presentations, and I do enjoy them.
So you attended another webinar that we did?
Yeah, I've been. This should be the third webinar I've been attending from Next Level.
Oh, okay. So I'm happy that you enjoyed. You had any question in particular that I could help you with?
Yes, I was going to ask if you could explain and expatiate a little bit on some of the risk factors to consider for international procurement.
Okay, so some of the risk factors.
Yes, to consider for international procurement and possibly how one can be able to mitigate it.
Oh, okay, all right. So, um, again, it is very important that we conduct the environmental scan. Now, you remember at the beginning of the presentation, I went over socio-demographic factors, right?
Sure.
And then on the economic factors, right? The political factors, the technological factors, the industry itself, right? And then the competitive forces and the customer factors. So each one of these elements are where your risk would come from, right? These are where your risk would come from. They would come from right there. Okay. So, for example, on the socio-demographic side, you would find that it's considered one of the mega trends now. There's a big movement of people from rural areas to the cities, right? This is a big seismic shift globally. So we have to ask the question: how does that affect your supply chain? That shift of the labor force. How would that affect in the big scheme of things? How would that disrupt your supply? Right? How would this affect your cost structure? Because again, we have to as a underpinning, or I would say um, a point of reference is how well are we managing spend, right? So if you want to look at it this way, your risk could come from spend, how well you're managing the spend. Your risk could come from disruptions to the support of your operations. So for example, if there are disruptions or tariffs or trade wars that slow down the flow of the inputs of those critical raw materials into your process, that's a risk right there. So we are always at risk to our supply chain by that disruption of the supply or the slowing down of the supply. Because what that does is that if you realize that you understand that you're able to procure your critical raw material inputs, and I'm just putting a figure out there, 60 days lead time from the time of your order to the time of it shows up at your dock, 60 days. Then for whatever reason, it could be some environmental factor, it could be some war or some political situation that's going on. All of a sudden, now it's 120 days. The lead time, it changed, right? Your customers are not going to wait. They're going to move somewhere else. So what happens is that in this case, as procurement professionals, what do? We build up inventories, correct?
Correct.
Now, building up inventories, that's another risk factor. What does that create when you build up unnecessary inventories, right? Depending on the type of inputs, right? I worked a lot in food manufacturing. So I remember one of our critical inputs was coffee. If you keep it too long, then what? It gets degraded, right? So the more unnecessary raw materials that you have or inventories, it's exposed to shrink, theft, expiration, right?
Sure.
Damage. So building up is not a solution. That's not always a good solution. So to be able to understand the movement and the lead times, and you know, you remember I mentioned value stream mapping, right? Where you look at all of the critical processes that exist in that international supply chain. So you place your order, right? Then the overseas supplier has to manufacture the order. That has a time to it, right? Then it has to be shipped from the manufacturer's plant. It has to go through the customs process, correct? The outgoing customs process. It has to be cleared. Then it has the shipment now, if it's containerized shipment. Then it has to come into your country and it has to clear customs. Each one of those have processes. So if you want to be able to reduce risk or identify where risk comes from, right, understand your risk in terms of time, right? So understand those processes, how long it takes to execute each one of those processes. And you will find that in between your process steps, you'll find a lot of time is being consumed as materials move from one stage or one process to the next. So from the time you get your order, it goes to your supply, maybe it might sit for a few days. Then it's manufactured, right? Then now it's manufactured, the supplier now, or your freight forwarder is going to call or make the arrangement for those materials to move from the supplier's dock to what? The point of export, correct? You will find that in between your processes, there are gaps that consume time. If you understand this and you're able to quantify that time into dollars, the longer your lead time, the greater the cost. If you shorten your lead time without compromising quality, the lower your cost. So again, in terms of where your risk factors are, conduct your environmental scanning. This is not theory, my friend. Just get a pen and a paper and write down socio-demographics in your supply chain. There are, right? Then write down what's the economic situation with your supplier, your economic situation, and all of the actors in your supply chain. Your freight forwarders has financial constraints as well, correct?
Sure.
Right. Your freight forwarder also has socio-demographic constraints. Your organization has socio-demographic constraints. Your supplier has socio-demographic constraints. You know what I mean by that? Labor force. You know, so think about that. So all these could be risk factors. And once you start mapping that, like putting it on a wall with Post-its, you'll see a whole plethora of risk, right? And then now, how to mitigate risk. Okay. Were you at the webinar for linking business, the procurement function to business value? Were you at that webinar?
I didn't think so.
Okay, so then you might want to download that. But how do you mitigate risk? So I showed you how you identify them, correct?
Sure.
Right, so the key is what's trending, understanding the trends on a regular basis, okay? And then two, what are the impacts of the trends? Negative or positive, right? And then how are you positioned? How is the organization positioned to deal with it? You might have so many risk factors and you have no strategy, right? It's going to be reactive. Most of the time it's reactive. We have to be strategic now. So how do you mitigate risk? You look at your processes and then you identify, you write down what I call, this is what we call the failure mode and effect analysis methodology. Failure mode and effect analysis methodology. Go online and research it, or I could send you the toolkits for it. Failure mode and effect analysis. So you look at failure mode and effect analysis. Failure, like failure. You're at a point of failure. You're in a failure mode. You're in a mode of failure. Effect, failure mode, and effects analysis. In other words, you want to identify how a process or how an element in your international supply chain could be in a mode of failure. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
So for example, how could I be in a mode of failure of delivering this webinar? One mode of failure is that you can't hear me. Now I'm in a mode of failure. Correct?
Might have issue with your network.
Right. Well, that's how I'm in a mode of failure. So you look at your processes, right, and see how a failure could occur. How a particular process could fail. Correct?
Correct.
Then now, so you make that and make it like a short to the point statement. How could you be in failure? Then you write down the impact of that failure to your business and to the customer. Don't just think about in a silo. Well, if I fail to get these materials in, I'm going to lose my job, or we're going to have this problem and that problem. Think about your customer. How does it affect your customer? Correct? So how could a process fail? What is the effect or impact it has on the business and the customer? Once you start thinking about that, my friend, your head would spin. How does it affect the customer and the business? And quantify it if you can in terms of dollars.
In other words, to have a big picture in terms of risk.
Oh yes, oh yes. How does it affect your customer in terms of dollars, in terms of safety issues, in terms of brand recognition or brand damage? Think about that. How does it affect your customer? Right? So how could something fail, and what's the effect or the impact of that failure? Again, short statement to the point. Okay, this is not a theoretical exercise. There are companies that this is what they do day in, day out. This is something that I practice with all of my projects. If I'm trying to improve a process, this is something that I use. It's very effective. It's not theory. I try to teach practical methods. So again, how could something fail, and what is the effect of the failure? Just write a short statement on what's the effect of the failure. Do this in Microsoft Excel. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, you're going to measure 3 things. How often does this occur? On a scale of 1 to 10. So if you put 10, oh man, it happens every day. Oh, Mr. David, just happened now. It happened this morning. It happened yesterday. On a scale of 1 to 10, how often does this failure occur? Correct?
Correct.
On a scale of 1 to 10, you scale it. And the best way to do this is to collaborate with others in your environment and come up with an agreement, a consensus. Right?
Sure.
Then the next thing now is, on a scale of 1 to 10, your ability to detect that you're going to slip into failure. Right? On a scale of 1 to 10. So if you score 10, it's like it's almost impossible to detect. You can't detect it. If it's like 1, the lower it is, the lower the number, that means you have a high capability to detect. If you put like 8 or 10 or 9, that means it's like you can't detect it. It's just going to happen. And now we have to deal with a mess. And then the next thing you want to measure on a scale of 1 to 10 is the severity of the impact. So severity, occurrence, and detection. These are 3 categories you're going to measure on a scale of 1 to 10. You following me so far?
Yeah, sure.
Right. Then you're going to come up with what we call a risk priority number. A risk priority number. The formula for risk priority number is severity times occurrence times detection. This is all you do this in Microsoft Excel. So for example, you have a particular, you identified a potential failure mode, correct?
You said times occurrence
times the severity times occurrence times detection. That's the formula for risk priority number.
Okay.
Okay?
Sure.
Okay. So again, I'm going to backtrack. You identify, right, a process or a supplier, depends on how you could use this in many different formats, right?
Sure.
Right? You identify that. How could it fail? How could it be a failure? Then you make sure that you understand and you write a statement on the effect of the failure, right?
Sure.
Right? Then you measure on a scale of 1 to 10, okay, the occurrence, how often it occurs. The greater, the worse. then the ability to detect the failure, right?
Sure.
Right? The greater the number, the worse. And then severity. The greater the number, the worse, on a scale of 1 to 10. So if you have a risk priority, if you have a particular process and there's an 8 out of 10 in terms of occurrence, and then there's a 10 out of 10 in terms of severity, the impact is, oh my God, what is the impact of this? If this happens, it's going to, so many bad things will happen, you know, to the customer, right? So let's say 10, it scored 10, and then the ability to detect is like, it just happens. It just comes all of a sudden, right? So 10. So 10 times 10 is 100, times 8 is 800. That's your risk priority number. The key with this, my friend, is to look at all of those risk factors and rank them. See if one scores a 800, another one scores a 300, another one scores a 50. Which one do you address first?
You have to address the 800.
That's screaming, hey, fix me and fix me now. This is you know, the one that's 50. If you could address all of them at once, fine. But the one that's 800 is a priority. That's why they call it a risk priority number. Now, the key with this now is, now you'll be able to identify and to really understand and to prioritize them, right? And again, to your point, yes, you deal with the ones that have the highest degree of what you call of severity or impact, right? Or the highest risk priority number. Then you could also look at this now in terms of fixing or reducing. The goal is to reduce the risk priority number. Now you may look now to deploy a project to reduce the risk priority number. You have to look at it in terms of what? Complexity, right? Complexity and time. So if for example, the one that scored 500, we said, you could do this in 3 days, and the one that's 800 will take you 4 months, right? You may want to, in this case, go to the 500 one, get it out of the way, and then deal with the one that's 800. You see what I'm saying? So and then you look at, the next step would be to come up with the recommended actions to reduce the risk priority number. And then who's responsible? And with this, you have to manage it over time and make sure that you have a continuous improvement process to look for the root causes of that risk priority number. So you look for the root causes of the risk priority number, okay? And you reduce them over time. Does that make sense? This is one very powerful methodology that organizations use to mitigate, to identify and mitigate risk. And I already gave you a spearhead as to where your risk elements would come from, right? It'll come from your environment. They're all over your environment. So again, what's trending in your environment, understanding the impact of those trends, and looking to see what strategies you have in place. And in terms of international procurement strategies, right? Your strategy should be a response to the environment, correct? It should be a response. That's an effective strategy, right? Which is a response to your environment. So I hope I was able to put everything together, and towards the end, you saw how we had the corporate high-level strategy and how we were able to take your department as a procurement or supply chain leader, make sure that you have your strategies with the metrics, and the key is to make sure all of those metrics, they're balanced and they're aligned. In other words, if you realize and optimize your metrics, you would enable your organization and you'll enable the other functions around you to realize the corporate mission. So with that said, on the matter of metrics, if you're not hitting your targets, the next process is not going to hit their targets. So for example, if you're supposed to bring in raw material inputs at a 99% quality level, right? This is the quality level of the raw materials that the organization needs to be profitable and to be effective. If you need realizing 88%, that means a huge amount of those raw material inputs are going to your conversion processes that are defective. as I said, garbage in, garbage out. So if you use defective raw material inputs, even if the conversion or the when I say conversion or manufacturing processes, if you're manufacturing, and then even in service environments, there's some method to convert inputs, right, to useful products and services. So the higher the defect rate of the raw material inputs, right, even if the manufacturing or the conversion processes are robust and capable, they're using compromised inputs. So the outputs are not going to meet customer requirements, right? So the matter of cheap, we just focus on price, cheap raw material inputs, and we're not looking at the big picture, right?
Sure.
It's counterproductive, my friend. So this is it's a holistic, we have to look at things holistically, especially in international procurement. There's so many parts of it. So to be able to leverage that SIPOC, remember I told you the SIPOC on a big level, end to end, and then we look at we do the same SIPOC now, a micro SIPOC on our procurement function itself, our process itself, right? Who are the suppliers to the inputs that we use? The inputs could be so many things. It could be email as an input to execute a particular process, for example, so informational inputs, right? It could be in the internet could be an input, right? For the manufacturing process, an input could be a recipe or a bill of materials. That's an input for them to execute their function. So to really look at this on the SIPOC methodology on a macro and a micro perspective is very, very, very important. And to answer your question in terms of risk, they're all over. But I hope you understand the dimensions of where those risks would come from. And
Sure.
just do that homework and see, what are the trends. So if you really want to understand socio-demographic trends, right? The director of HR, that's a subject matter expert, or should be in your who could provide you with that information, right? And in terms of the customer trends and shifts, right? Your customer service department, they engage your customers on a day-to-day basis. The director of customer service should be a subject matter expert in terms of the customer dynamics in your space. So you could tap them and you be abreast of all of these things that you're swimming around. Because the bottom line is that procurement, if you don't bring those materials in, nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
Nothing happens. So the economic factors, your director of finance is an expert in finance who could really understand and should be aligned to the big picture, not just finance on the profit and loss statements or the balance sheet of your organization, but really understanding the big picture, right? So if you're procuring from somewhere in Asia, they understand the economic situation in Asia and the impact. They could foresee certain things. So they should be aware. So if all these subject matter experts are aware of these things and you develop an environmental scanning process, right, in your organization, in synchronization with the SWOT analysis, right? But this environmental scanning thing should be continuous, ongoing, that could give you critical inputs in how you need to position your procurement function in response to those trends, because all of those trends bring risk. If there's a war in a country where you're procuring your materials from, that's a risk factor right there. So you can, oh my God, you're reactive. You have to do the research to see the trends and see where things are going. So the environmental scanning process is a forward-thinking assessment and a forward-thinking mechanism. So you won't be reactive. You can be more strategic into your posture. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much for the insight. I really enjoyed, and
you're welcome.
Really gave me a different perspective and understanding of how to be able to assess and draw plans to mitigate the risk. One thing I would ask, do you have any previous past seminar on this that maybe I could request the slides or material so I could continue my...
Yes. How how to link the procurement function to business value. I think that's a very good one. I could forward you the recording on that.
Oh, that would
Yeah. Also, too, I could send you the failure mode and effect analysis. I could send you the toolkits. And the idea, my friend, is simplicity. It's a simple toolkit. You don't need all these big things, and then you look at it as like you you need simple but robust and effective tools, and that's a very simple but powerful methodology.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, because a while ago I did an audit, ISO audit at a big company. I can't say where it is, and they use the failure mode and effect analysis. The 14,500 company, they use it. So if you look at this go online and do research on companies that use failure mode and effect analysis, you'll be surprised. It's a very simple but powerful thing. I could send you the toolkit if you want. So my email is dmillington@nextlevelpurchasing.com.
Yeah. Can you spell Millington for me?
Yeah, Millington. So
Okay.
D as David, Millington@nextlevelpurchasing.com.
D as in David, M as in Martha, I as in India, L as in labor, L as in labor, I as in India, N as in Nigeria, G as in Georgia, T as in Texas, O as in orange, N as in Niger, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. I really enjoy this and I appreciate this. So I'll
You
hit you up with a mail and I will be grateful if you could send me those resources and so I could take a look at them and learn more.
Sure, this is why we're here. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Remember, sir.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm still online. If anybody else has any other questions, I'll be here for a little bit. Hi, Christian, you had any questions?
Yeah, we just finished speaking
Oh,
right now.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Hello. Okay, he's muted. Hello, Lisa. Did you have any questions? Okay, so that's it for today. Again, thank you for attending today's webinar.